Hi guys, it's Ollie from Rad Season. Welcome to the Rad Season show, and I'm stoked to be joined today on another episode by the general manager or the managing director of Crankworx, Darren Kinnaird. Darren, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic, Ollie. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And you're over in New Zealand at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, we're here. We're here for the Crankworx Summer Series, New Zealand. It sort of went through November and December, and yeah, it's just been an amazing time down here. Sun's been shining, and yeah, everyone's having a good time.
Nice one. And how did everything go with Rotorua? Was it it was amazing that could run, and yeah, how are you feeling after that?
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, the team in New Zealand, they definitely feel like family. And to quote our photographer, Clint Trahan, he always says that Whistler's the heart of Crankworx, but Rotorua is the soul. And this year you really saw that. The people really came together. I mean, they had to deal with a lot of changing restrictions and COVID stuff. I mean, it's so new here for people in New Zealand. Like a lot of what they were dealing with felt like old hat for a lot of us. But last minute having to make the decision to have no spectators on site, which is a bummer. But no, I think from a sport and competition perspective and content perspective, things went really well. We had some weather challenges. I've never seen Rotorua so windy, which was kind of crazy. But in the end, we had really great competition. People were stoked on the events we could run, and then the slopestyle event sort of capped things off with just it was a storybook ending to the whole season with Emil Johansson winning the Triple Crown. And it set off a multi-hour, multi-day, multi-week party in New Zealand. So, which we've kind of been riding that wave now for a few weeks here. But yeah, it was really good.
Nice. And I guess with all the international athletes and teams and everyone coming over, I mean, you guys were in quarantine. Was it like it was for 2 weeks or something, right?
Yeah, 14 days. We're really fortunate. Crankworx was designated a essential service in New Zealand back in May of 2020. And maybe they didn't realize what they were doing at the time by declaring us as an essential service. But no, because we had that designation, we were able to get critical workers, air quotes, into New Zealand. And so there was 56 people that were, given an MIQ spots to get into the country. And, that definitely took a lot of convincing to get people to say, yeah, okay, I'll sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And most people that did it in the end, they've, being here in New Zealand at this time has been more than worth the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was tough though. Like it's, repetitive food. You're kind of like, why are we doing this? Blah, 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 blah. But in the end, I think it was worth it. It was kind of funny though, that the day we got out of MIQ, they announced that the rules were changing to 7 days. And we were all just like, no, I can easily do 7 days. But anyways, our time was up. So
yeah,
we were released, and it was a good feeling.
Nice. Well, I'd love to kind of talk about the summer series that you guys had in BC, and then obviously what you're going to be working on, and sort of what you've been planning over in New Zealand. But before that, if that's okay, like how did you get involved in Crankworx? How did that all kind of begin over at home in Canada?
Yeah, so I moved to Whistler in March of 1999, and my goal is to be a ski bum. And I was really, really into skiing. And around 2005, I I think I had the summer off because of a back injury, but I ended up volunteering for Crankworx.
Okay.
And so I kind of, yeah, I volunteered the whole week. I did the same again in 2006. And then started to get more involved in some of the sales and marketing coordination stuff with the Whistler Mountain Bike Park. And then was asked in 2007 if I could come on in a short-term role to look after some sponsors during Crankworx Whistlers. This is 2007. The following year, was a was asked to take on the expo sales for both Whistler and Winter Park because we were doing Crankworx Colorado at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of just evolved into managing all the sponsorship stuff for Crankworx and the Whistler Mountain Bike Park. And then in 2010, was asked to become the general manager. Jeremy Roche, who was the business development manager and Crankworx manager at the time, he had a lot on his plate and he wanted to focus more on the business development side of things. And so there was a need for someone to step into that role. For me, it was a dream opportunity. I love sports. I love mountain biking. I love Whistler. It was just a dream come true to sort of get into that position and sort of have been in that role now for almost, I guess, over a decade. So.
And when you were kind of doing the sponsorship and the partnership stuff, so when you went from volunteering and then kind of took on that role, that sort of tied in like you were kind of doing a few different events, weren't you? Like before you were volunteering and you kind of had that sort of experience anyway.
Yeah. So, I was working for, the ski school, and was working on, like corporate, groups and events. So we had a lot of corporate business that would come to Whistler Blackcomb. And so I was looking after that from the ski school perspective, but they also asked me to take on, this every Sunday night fire and ice show. Where it was like a welcome to Whistler, and we'd have ski and snowboard athletes choreographed jumping through a ring of fire, and this was a great way to invite people to the resort, let them know what was going on every week. But it was sort of my first real introduction to like proper organized events. I'd always been, I was always the one to organize the ski trips in high school or in university or all that sort of stuff. And so it was kind of a natural thing I felt. And as we got closer to the Whistler Olympics coming on, they had this thing called Whistler Live, where there was activity and events and music and bands and entertainment going on every day during the Olympics. And they asked the Fire and Ice Show to be a key part of that every night during the Olympics. So we did 14 nights in a row of like fire and ice on steroids. So like we had 3 rings, the whole thing was choreographed. We had music, we had dancers, we had bands playing. Like it was really like, it was really cool. And so, yeah, I was doing some of that stuff. I had done a couple of things with the World Ski and Snowboard Festival to organize. Like we had some women's free ride stuff that I was involved in. And yeah, it's just, I love events. I love being involved in them. I love seeing, athletes doing their best, the big smiles on their faces, fans enjoying that stuff, and just really enjoy it all.
And was that just, were you kind of preparing it and kind of planning out of season, so it's out of the winter, or were you kind of then leaving the resort, or like kind of getting out of Whistler? And
yeah, the first 2 summers I'd lived in, so yeah, like when I first moved to Whistler, I just wanted to be a ski bum. That's all I wanted to do was ski. And I wasn't sure how long I was going to stay. When they announced the Olympics in 2003, I was like, okay, I got to stay. This is going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. But I wasn't really sure what to do in the summers. I wasn't quite into mountain biking yet in the early 2000s. I actually spent 2 summers in Spain, in Puerto Banús, bartending in a nightclub. and that was no fun. And but
It's a crazy place. I've got family who are kind of between Malaga and Granada, and I went to university over there for a year, and yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I always joked with my friends back in Canada that if you didn't see 4 Ferraris a day, you didn't go outside. Like I always tried to describe it as the French Riviera of Spain. But that was a lot of fun. And then I realized I needed to, I couldn't do that forever, and started, trying to find a summer role in Whistler, and that sort of just, it was all the evolution of that, was figuring out what was I going to do in the summers in Whistler. I had been working at a golf course, but golf.
Did you just know that you wanted to stay there, and you were like, okay, I'm going to try and figure out how I can kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally the Olympics were the impetus for staying in Whistler. I can remember vividly sitting on Cheetah's patio in Whistler Village Square while we were waiting for the announcement to be made about the Olympics. And literally, as they said, Vancouver's got the bid, thinking to myself, okay, well, there goes the next 7 years of my life, because I'm not leaving. I'm not missing this opportunity.
Yeah.
To just to experience it. I mean, I was always and still am a big fan of the Olympics. Mm-hmm. I had this dream one day that I'd be an Olympic sprinter, but that dream was quickly realized to not be a reality. Like when I was 14. I remember sitting on that patio and going, okay, I'm not missing this. And I'm glad I didn't, because the Olympics were just like a nonstop fun party events. The village was just buzzing. And, I think in addition to it being a ton of fun, I actually learned a lot about, sort of the big picture of events and activation, and how the whole village can come together, and, pulled in a lot of those learnings, I think, into my early work as the general manager of Crankworx in 2011, 12, 13. So, yeah.
And like back then, I mean, what were kind of the, I guess, the challenges that you were sort of facing? I mean, was it like predominantly it was just the live events, and then you were kind of like looking for different locations, and like you were thinking like, how are you going to expand this, and how would you turn it into a tour? And
yeah, I mean, I think I was really conscious that, if we wanted to control our destiny, we needed to be bigger than something that was just in Whistler. I mean, we had the event in Colorado, but it wasn't really that tied to Crankworx Whistler, not like the World Tour is today.
Yeah.
Back then, Colorado, they had their own website. They had their own social channels. So it wasn't really leveraging what we'd already built. Yeah. And so, around 2011, when they sort of made the decision to go their own way, do the Colorado Freeride Fest, they were paying us a license fee, and we'd wanted to sort of change how we were doing things, and bring it more under the Crankworx umbrella. Mm-hmm. About that same time, there was an opportunity to go to France, and really, when sort of we got our teeth into that, it was like, we can't let this go. This is a big opportunity to expand overseas. And so we pushed really hard, worked really hard with the team in Les Deux Alpes, and were able to seamlessly go from Colorado to Les Deux Alpes. And
did they reach out to you guys, or did you kind of?
Yeah, there were some people from France that had been to, I think they'd been to Crankworx Whistler in 2006. Had been again in 2010, and I think had reached out again in 2011, and I just started reaching out to them, phone call, email, whatever, and sort of they had a plan to do something in Les Deux Alpes in 2012. Are we talking? Yeah, 2012, with the goal of that becoming a Crankworx in 2013. They were short a little bit of money to make it a full Crankworx festival in 2012. But we did have one of our good sponsors at the time of Crankworx Whistler kind of came to me in November and said, hey Darren, I got this money that I have to spend in Europe. What should I do with it? And I was like, well, I got an idea. And so we were able to use that money to sort of get the event in Les Deux Alpes over the line so that it could become a Crankworx in 2012, and the rest is history. It's we made a big philosophical change, or I don't know if philosophical is the right word, but we made a big change in how we approached new festivals, in that we wanted for all of our stakeholders, for when they go to a different place, that it still tastes, touch, feels, smells like Crankworx. And that didn't happen in Winter Park necessarily, because it wasn't our athlete manager looking after the athletes. It wasn't our partnership team looking after the sponsors. And, it wasn't our brand. It wasn't our channels. It wasn't our comms, all that sort of stuff. And so then when we went to France, that really, really changed. And I think, all of our stakeholders benefited from that and felt the difference. And so that was sort of like the launch point for what ultimately became the Crankworx World Tour.
And I mean, back then we like you guys would have got approached quite a lot from different locations and destinations, and were you sort of strategically kind of thinking about, okay, how what do you choose? What which place do you go to? And kind of keeping that essence that have so it's not going to be done incorrectly or kind of not within your vision, I guess.
No, yeah, I mean, I think one of the key goals we've always had is to take people to the best riding destinations in the world. That's been part of the goal, is to to get engaged in these communities where there is a strong riding scene, or there's a strong desire to develop a riding scene. At the end of the day, mountain biking is about trails, and where there's good trails, there's good riding, there's a good scene. And so there hasn't really been one set way that we have explored new locations. In the past, locations have reached out to us. Myself and our sport manager did a tour of northern Italy and Austria it was 2015 or 2016, because there was such an interest from our partners about, it would be great to find somewhere in a German speaking area, which ultimately led us to Innsbruck.
So were you guys just touring around all the resorts and checking everything out?
Yeah, meeting with resort officials, riding their bike parks, checking these things out, just having a look around to see, which location could potentially work for a Crankworx. I think we visited Saalbach and Solden and what was the Plan del Graba in the Dolomites. There was a couple other places we visited as well, but when we met with the team in Innsbruck, they were had big plans and visions about building the Innsbruck bike park, and just trying to harness the whole scene that was really underground in Innsbruck. And so that's ultimately where we ended up settling.
Okay. And was that then, I mean, were you kind of involved with the Free Ride Mountain Biking Association then? Was that kind of...
Yeah. So when I took over as the general manager in 2010, joined the I think at the time I was just on the advisory board of the FMBA. My predecessor, he had been one of the board of directors, but I wasn't really, I don't know, I just wasn't, they didn't need someone. I wanted to be involved, but didn't need to necessarily be that involved. Did become one of the board of directors in 2016 now, if I remember correctly. And so have always had involvement in that side of things, I guess, for the last 10 years now. We've it's really a volunteer thing. Myself, Tarek Razuli, and Alex Dorr, we're the board of directors. It's a volunteer, a labor of love. We're all involved in the sport in some way, somehow, but and there's a number of other people that serve on sort of the advisory board, like Todd Barber, who sort of oversees Rampage. He's involved quite a bit still. He used to be on the board of directors. There's a few athletes that still stay involved. But yeah, no, and then we've actually, so our company, Crankworx Events Inc., we've actually started to take over the management of the FMBA as well. And so our team, it was sort of like two teams looking after marketing and communications, and then sort of the operation administration. And so our team's now managing all that, and our team's expanded a little bit last year to take on that stuff. So
nice.
Yeah,
good stuff. And well, I guess, I mean, with what happened last year, I mean, I'd love to kind of talk about, I mean, like, no one was really expecting, before like March 2020, when everything kind of kicked off, and all the changes during the pandemic. I mean, what did you guys sort of like when you first heard about it? Like, what did you do for one as an events company? Kind of faced with that situation?
Yeah. So a good buddy of mine was joking with me the other day on Instagram that I need to write a book called Resiliency, but my business partner, TJ Walker, and I we had been in negotiations to actually buy Crankworx. And so we were kind of getting close to a resolution-ish around the end of February 2020. Kind of put things on hold because we had to go execute Crankworx Rotorua. When I left Canada, I think it was the 28th of February, I'd heard about COVID, but there was a woman that had flown from Toronto to Vancouver that had tested positive, and that was really all it was when we left. When we got to New Zealand, it was definitely there was more about it, and we had a couple of athletes. I think there was 5 athletes that had come from parts of Italy that were on a red list in New Zealand, or I think there's 3 athletes from China that had come into the country, and so they were being asked to isolate for 14 days, which caused its own headaches. But really didn't have a good understanding of what was to come.
Yeah.
And so I flew home, I think around the 11th or 12th of March. Some of our team stayed in New Zealand, some went on vacation to Indonesia, whatever. But I was in the office for one day, and part of our team was still working in the office in Canada, and it was like, this doesn't seem good. We should probably plan to work from home tomorrow. And so the next day was Friday. By Saturday, the whole Whistler Blackcomb was shut down. The resort of Whistler was shut. And so, immediately we're like, well, okay, what happens now? And not a clue how long this was going to go on for. And so, my son's home, I think it was spring break came in just about the time that their school holidays came in for 2 weeks, just around the time this all happened. So he was home anyways. And so just spent a lot of time, doing things with my then 9-year-old son. We would mountain bike for gym class, and just spent a lot of time with him. And, talking to my business partners, like, well, what are we going to do? Like, do we go forward with this? Like, what's the plan? And, I was reading a lot, listening to podcasts, just sort of trying to, gain some inspiration from some source, whatever. And
Yeah.
I remember hearing it was kind of a mentor, actually, Mark Harrison, who runs a few different companies, but one is T1. It's a marketing agency or sponsorship agency in Toronto. And he was talking about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the NHL just sent all the players to Canada and they just played in all these small communities in Canada?
Yeah.
Because there was COVID wasn't that bad in Canada at the time. And we actually got the first wave, which now seems like a blip, under control relatively. So it was like, well, maybe we can do this in Canada, because the States was kind of going out of control. And I thought, is there something there? And then, I'd go on a bike ride with my son, and, I thought to myself, like, if this is what our summer entails, is me just hanging out with my son, riding my bike, well, this ain't so bad. We live in one of the best mountain bike places in the world. We got bike parks all over the province. And it's just like, suddenly something just clicked, that it was like, well, wait a second. We do have some of the best mountain bike destinations in the world here in BC. We have a lot of the best athletes from all disciplines that live here in BC. And we have a lot of the industry that's here. And we got a lot of like filmers and photographers and everything that's here. Why don't we just bring that all together and make something happen? And so I'm back to my business partner mid-April. I'm like, TJ, I got it. We'll do this thing called the Summer Series, the Crankworx Summer Series, and we'll have these athletes from all these disciplines come together and compete. And so one of our very first calls was with this group of athletes, and we said, hey guys, girls, we're probably not doing much this summer, but we may have an opportunity as a group to do something. And immediately they were like right into it. I think it was Jesse Melamed who said, okay, if we're going to do this, everyone has to do everything, and it's winner take all. And it was like, okay, right on. I was really hoping that was going to be the case. But they put it forward, and everyone was like, yeah, let's do this. So
they would be keen to, like, just to compete, right? I mean, it's sort of like,
yeah. I mean, for a lot of them, that was their season, and that was their content and their opportunity. And it was really neat because they all had new kits that they hadn't been able to use. They had bikes that were still under wrap that they hadn't been able to release. So they were riding these like prototypes and stuff that were under wrap. And, I think Finn was like on his downhill bike had no paint. Like, it was just the airbrushed metal. Like, there was there was nothing on it. So that was kind of what their summer entailed. But, no, I mean, with that idea in mind, we proceeded to go ahead with like pursuing the sale. And it wasn't until the 27th of July that we, everything was done with the sale, and we announced Summer Series starting that day. And it was sort of it was crazy. I'm not sure I'd ever do anything that way again.
Did you get partners? Like, were you like for sponsors and partners? Did you kind of get them on before? Like, were you pretty open right from the beginning when it all when the shit hit the fan? Right? Were you sort of like, this is what, when you had the idea, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Are you guys interested? And
yeah, absolutely. We went to our partners right away, and mixed reaction. Some were like, oh yeah, we're gonna hold back. I mean, this was like pre mountain biking and cycling going like exploded. No one knew it was gonna happen. So like, oh yeah, we're gonna, just pull everything close to the vest. We're not sure what's gonna happen. But a lot of our other partners, they wanted to be a part of it for, one, because they wanted to, and they want to be a part of Crankworx, but they wanted to ensure that, we as an event company and as a platform for them would survive. And so some of our partners came on for that reason. Others were just like, holy smokes, I can't believe you guys have come up with this. This is amazing. Yeah, we're totally in. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think every step of the way, we had a lot of meetings where it was just, this is the scenario we're currently facing. Here's the dates. Here's everything that we're currently facing. We still can't pull the trigger yet, but it's looking positive. And so we would have touch points with every stakeholder, whether that was the athletes every 2 weeks, or some of our media partners or production partners every 2 weeks, our partner, like our sponsors every 2 weeks, just to keep them, the fire's still burning here. We've got something, and as soon as the province says we can do it, we're going to go. And we did have to push things out. Like, I think the original dates were going to be mid-July, and that became unrealistic. I think the first time we moved the dates was actually because there was too much snow at some peaks. But we had to push things out, and then in the end we got just the perfect weather, perfect dates. Everything worked out really well. And we did something that, I don't think there was nowhere else in the world that could really pull that off. We were just, we had a unique, situation that we were in, with the athletes, the brands, the bike parks, the riding, all being in one place and being able to pull something off like that.
I don't think any sports really could, right? I mean, I know like with surfing, they had to like that, but that was later, and then they were like sending people to places and then sort of having it, quarantined. And
there was a few random things. Like, I think, was it Djokovic put on a tennis tournament in Croatia, and then everyone got COVID, and so there was a few things. I think there was like an Australian surf event like this.
Okay,
yeah, I think we were one of the first. Certainly in mountain biking, we're the first to do anything like that, and we learned a lot. Like, how was the
concept? It was all like then just digital first, right? You're just thinking like how?
Oh yeah, completely. It's all broadcast and social media and content and we threw everything at the wall of what would potentially work. Like, we tried to look at what were the successful elements of a regular festival and go, how do you deliver that digitally? And so, we had all sorts of ideas. Like, do you create a virtual expo, or do you, something along those lines? And, a lot of ideas got like, no, that's never going to work. Some we kept and sort of worked, but, for the most part, people want to be entertained. They, and we were able to provide that. So yeah, it was all completely digital first.
Were you looking at things like outside of the industry? Were you looking at like things like how music kind of like music festivals pivoted, or like things like that? Or were you kind of looking at?
Not necessarily. I think we were more looking at how things like the NHL, like the National Hockey League or the NBA, pulled off the end of their season.
Yeah.
They did it with, creative ways of providing great sport, great engagement, and great entertainment. And so that was sort of where we drew our inspiration from, I would say, on top of just making stuff up as we went.
And were you having like did you have loads of kind of backup plans and sort of like things? Were you kind of looking at stuff like, okay, if this doesn't, or was it sort of like a set strategy, like, okay, we're going to try this and kind of, adapt as it evolved? Because this is all new, right? So it's kind of
when I came up with the idea, I called our operations director, and it was like on a Saturday night, and I said, Jen, I got this idea. And she's like, why are you calling me? Like it was late on Saturday night. Yeah. And I said, okay, Monday morning, we're going to get the team together and we're just going to whiteboard. And like, I was like, how do we do a virtual whiteboard? Let's just put a whole bunch of ideas on the board. And we kind of started with this one, and no other ideas ended up on the board. We had been like, doing, everyone was kind of doing, okay, we're going to do Instagram live interviews to just sort of keep the lights on, or do, all sorts of just things, and to try and stay engaged. But none of them were, they weren't truly, I don't think, necessarily delivering value for, our sponsors per se, or, yeah, I mean, it was sort of like, okay, what are we going to do to keep ourselves almost busy while, in Canada, the government was able to cover a lot of people's wages. And so it was like, okay, to stay busy, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of those things. But when we came up with this idea, the whole team was just, yes, let's do this. And they could see when we spoke to the athletes, when we spoke to partners, their excitement and enthusiasm behind it. It was like, this is a no-brainer. And so, I mean, it was a lot of work. We were understaffed by at least 6 people. I mean, I don't know that I've ever worked so hard in my life, but it was so rewarding and it was so much fun. And, we got to do something really cool, and we were very fortunate when, a lot of people in the world were just not doing anything. Yeah. And, we're still locked down and whatever. So it was a really, really rewarding experience that we learned a ton from.
And like, did you think about then, like, the concept of having the summer series over in New Zealand? And was that at the same time? Like, after you said you just worked so hard, you never worked that hard before, you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to do it in another location as well. How did that happen?
I think I have like the memory of a snail or something, because maybe that's not the right animal, but maybe it's an elephant. I quickly forget how hard things were to be like, oh, that was awesome. Let's do it again. Yeah. But it was sort of, okay, I did immediately call the team in New Zealand when we were done and sort of said, okay, if we can't do the big festival, could we do something else? And because they were able to, at the time, eradicate COVID here, and it was gone for 12, whatever it was, months here. Mm-hmm. That happened relatively quickly in the conversation. So they came back to us with was, well, let's do both. And, we knew we had this critical worker status to get into the country. So, it was like, well, let's make the most of getting everyone here. Yeah. And so the team in New Zealand started to talk with Queenstown and Christchurch and Nelson about the concept. And sort of we shared some of the information and concepts and data that we had been able to, create and pull through from the summer series we had done. And there was a lot of interest. And so ultimately where it landed was Alexandra, Queenstown, and Wanaka. And ultimately this is where we landed, is on these three locations. And
everyone would be stoked. I mean, all these local communities would be like, if they can come out and, like, obviously, like, watch it. And
so the first stop in Alexandra, they weren't under the traffic light system that's now in place in New Zealand. Okay. And so they were under the old level 4, 3, 2, 1. And Alexandra and most of the South Island was under level 2, which meant you were allowed to have people, but only 100. And so, we did things in Alexandra where it was really about connecting with the community. Mm-hmm. We had some of the women, so Casey Brown, Katie Winton, Cassie Voicey went on there's a weekly girls ride for 12 to 15-year-old girls in Alexandra. And so they went and joined that ride. And we had some of the athletes going to the schools to connect with the kids. And it was really cool because Casey Brown grew up in a little town, or part of her childhood was in a little town called Clyde, which is about 5 minutes from Alexandra. Okay. And so her elementary school is still there. And so she went back to her elementary school to speak to the kids. Nice. I think partially he was trying to exercise some demons and hopefully run into the principal to say, see, I made something of my life. But
look at me now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But it was really cool to see them, to see that happen. And then, of course, as we had transitioned to being in Queenstown, there is so much to do here. Yeah, jet boating and bungee jumping and
it's like the extreme capital of the world, isn't it? You can do like whatever kind of bungee you can think of.
Wakeboarding and tubing and you name it. And so, I mean, tourism here is, if it's 10% of what it should be, I'd be shocked right now, because, or what it was. And, you know, like Auckland was in lockdown, like you couldn't leave Auckland. And so the events and activities are just looking for ways to promote and, you know, when they can reopen, get people here. And so the athletes have been doing everything. They're absolutely having they've been having the time of their lives doing everything, you know, float planes over to Milford Sound,
heli biking, and, you know, everything.
Heli biking, heli this, wine tasting, you know, it's just been nonstop overload of the sensories for sure. So they're all having the time of their lives, which is incredible. And I know, you know, from the athlete's perspective, you know, like everyone else, the last 18 or whatever so months has been really, really difficult and really challenging. And so it's great to see them get the opportunity to just sort of, you know, just enjoy life for a minute. And yeah, I mean, we're all getting to experience that right now over here, and not taking any of it for granted at all.
Yeah. And how do you think it like leaves the organization and Crankworx? I mean, how are you feeling about everything?
Yeah, so, you know, I talked about resiliency. I think it's taught all of us to be extremely resilient. You know, our team has worked so hard the last 12, 14 months to pull off the Crankworx World Tour this past year. It definitely, you know, it's not been perfect. But, you know, with all the things that were thrown at us, in addition to COVID, you know, I've never had to defrost a slopestyle feature before. You know, we had to like defrost the slopestyle features in Silver Star. It would take like 3 hours every morning to get the course, just the ice off the course. But it's actually, I mean, the resiliency part of it and the learning, you know, as a team, you know, we've always tried to strive to, as a team, understand how in our roles we can impact each other's stakeholders. You know, just because you're a sponsorship person doesn't mean you can't improve the lives of athletes, or if you're the athlete manager, you can't make, you know, the destination's experience better, whatever it is. But this whole experience has really, I think, taught the team to really come together around that and truly understand that, you know, if you're working in communications and marketing, you play such a critical role now in delivering for our sponsors, that, you know, they're linked now, which is great. And I mean, it's something that we've strived to achieve in the past, but now truly, I believe, have. And so from that perspective, it's been hugely valuable, from a learning perspective. And, you know, it's given us an opportunity to experiment with all sorts of new things. You know, the Summer Series being one of them. And I actually think that, you know, going forward, you know, the focus has always been on the big festival and, you know, having these like massive anchor points, and those are going to continue to be, you know, we'd always, the goal of the Crankworx World Tour was to create a all roads lead to Whistler. You know, everything ultimately leads to Whistler on the World Tour. And I don't know if we'll ultimately get back to that. I mean, the calendar for 2022, we have, you know, New Zealand's going to be in November again. It's just, there's no way of possibly doing it in March next year. We're not sure what the future holds. But, you know, the anchor festivals will still be there. We are going to be announcing a fourth Crankworx World Tour stop and very soon.
Nice.
If not, by the time this is released, it may already be out. And then, yeah, I mean, the idea of this summer series concept is definitely taking off.
Would you roll it out like in around the sort of main anchor events? Is that something that you guys would consider?
Yeah. So the, you know, like one of the goals initially with even the New Zealand Summer Series was to create all roads lead to Rotorua. And so that's still in the back of the mind, the goal. And part of that, part of those roads may be in Australia, that, there's mini events and things over there that could lead to Rotorua as well.
Yeah.
There is going to be a lot of
almost like a continent thing, right? So you can kind of split it out.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I think right now governments around the world realize that they need to keep people afloat, but also then stimulate things to get back going again. And tourism around the world is just gone in the tank. I mean, it's completely gone in the tank. So whatever governments can do to stimulate tourism, and events are, I think, a big part of that. Are whether it's our anchor festivals or these other things, like all the things that happen in Alexandra. If those things can happen and you can promote those destinations around the world, then that's ultimately the goal of tourism. And so we're getting. There's a lot of interest from communities in Canada about potentially holding summer series stops, and so we'll see where that goes in the future. But we definitely think that's a big part of the Crankworx future, is these sort of feeder events into the sort of anchor events.
Yeah, and with the boom in like uptake in people like getting into mountain biking or kind of rediscovering it, have you kind of seen a knock-on effect of that? And then like people kind of like has the audience grown, or have the viewers gone up, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's been sort of all over the shop, to be honest. There's definitely been growth in viewership and sort of the audience, and I think the way people consume content changes and evolves, and as new platforms come on, how and how people get their content is always evolving. I think one of the things from Innsbruck that we saw that was really interesting was things that would typically entertain people on site, like the whip off, or we just made up a scrub off one morning in case there was a delay in slopestyle. Those things that were sort of their true festival elements that entertain people on site, people couldn't be there to experience that. And so when we shared those elements of the festival online, people loved it. And so that again was sort of another key learning, is how do we do more of that? But yeah, I think from a participation standpoint, I think we're going when events and festivals and things can get back, and grassroots racing can come back, and all these racing series and stuff. I think there's going to be an explosion in participation. I mean, it's mountain biking and cycling as a whole, we all know, has exploded. And I've heard some stats from some of our partners, and I can't recall, but I was blown away by it. I think it was like 16 million new cyclists in the first half of 2021 or something stupid like that in the US. Like, it's just nuts. Like 16 million people for the first time ever buying a bike.
Wow.
Like, that's incredible.
Crazy, isn't it?
So yeah, I mean, the opportunity for anyone involved in cycling and events and tourism, the people are out there, and they want to be a part of these activities. They want to engage in them. Some want to race, some just want to participate, but
they want to have a unique experience as well, right? So if they're going to go to France or Austria or Whistler, like kind of go there when something is fun that's going on, and like the whole town is involved. And
no, absolutely. And I think one of the really cool things about Crankworx is that we create these lifelong memorable experiences that people they talk about forever. We run into people all the time, and they're like, oh yeah, I was at Crankworx in 2008, and that was the most amazing week of my life. And they're now married with 2-3 kids, and I'm like, well, bring them back, because now we got something for the kids too.
Some kids races, get involved.
Exactly, yeah. KidsWorks and CW Next and all of it. There's something for everyone.
Nice. And if people want to get in contact and sort of follow what you guys are up to, what's the best way?
Yeah, at Crankworx on Instagram, Crankworx on Facebook, Twitter, you name it. At Crankworx on TikTok, we're figuring TikTok out and what sort of goes and works on there. And
Yeah.
Crankworx.com, all the Crankworx. So
nice.
Yeah.
Darren, thanks so much for your time, man. It's been awesome hearing the whole journey of Crankworx, and it's going to be super exciting to see 2022 and what you guys are working on, and yeah, with all the different style of and formats of events and everything, it's going to be good.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. We're looking forward to 22, and yeah, thanks for having me on, Ollie.
Thanks, man. Cheers.
Bye.